but it is different.
Well, and it's especially challenging, I would think, for the kind of person who frankly becomes the CEO of a company to say, you've got to give up control over what may be your most valuable asset.
And it isn't about abdicating control, but it is about recognizing that, back to the word we were using before, if you want, and indeed you do need, consumer engagement, it's now an interactive conversation. It's not a one-way communication anymore, and you do have to be prepared for that. But I think it also underscores what Mark was describing in terms of his strategy, which is the need for focus. That the brands and the companies that are struggling the most are the ones that are not crisp in their focus, that are trying to be all things, do all things. And I think that's a very tough space to play in.
Yeah. For us, when we started 10 years ago, we did a couple things, and Christie hit on it. We eliminated a lot of channels of distribution. We eliminated product ranges. We eliminated all kinds of things. We actually changed our logo. A dramatic shift. I mean, so for us, we went from this stack logo to this kind of speed-like logo called TaylorMade, one word. We changed our corporate colors. So we went out with some real visible changes. We're not in those channels of distribution. The logos changed. The association with certain golfers changed. So we changed everything. And then we've got so focused on, because I think with all this clutter out there today and the noise around everything, if you have two sentences to describe your brand, it's going to be confusing. So we had one. We're a brand for the 0 to 4 handicap. That's the brand positioning that we went forward with. So if you were, so we excluded people from our brand positioning. What happened in doing that was because we believed that golf was this game of aspiration. You want to be like somebody. By excluding people in the brand positioning,
you made it more desirable.
It actually became more desirable.
Absolutely.
Right.
It was like, my God, we were geniuses. We didn't know that at the time, but that's what happened.
No, but that's absolutely true, because you allowed the brand to be authentic for its core customer, and the aspirational market saw that. And while it would seem as if the businesses were very different, when we created our first location-based entertainment in Las Vegas, we did it with the Palms, because it was really important to do it with a partner that would deliver on the hipness factor of what people thought a party at the Playboy Mansion would be like, with the same thought that if you could get those people, if, as it turned out to happen, if George Clooney was going to go stay there, then the next circle of people who thought, well, that's got to be pretty cool, would still be drawn to your brand.
Yep. Now, every brand just about has gone through at least a challenge in these past few years, with the economy doing what it has done. A remarkable thing with TaylorMade is you were just saying that you've had a great first 6 months of the year?
Yeah.
Best ever?
Best ever.
How can you explain this? I mean, what did you do to get through this very challenging period so well?
Well, I think it's pretty understood that strong brands do well in tough times, and I think when consumers are confused, they go to brands that they recognize the most. We've had so much consolidation in our category over the last 10 years. We're down to about 6 or 7 legitimate brands. So we're one of those lead brands. So we definitely are kind of leading in the brand chase. But I think what's driven our company is the understanding from our employees, and we work on this a lot. I mean, we really walk the talk, that we're going to grow no matter what the circumstances in the industry. And so we don't look at the upcoming year as a challenge. We look at the upcoming years. How do we how do we make this into an opportunity? And I know those are easy words to say, and everybody says those, but I really believe that that's in our DNA now, that we are going to grow no matter what. We have control of our growth, and then what we do, very much like you were talking about, who's at the center of success. It's no longer the leadership of companies, it's the people who are doing the work. And when you ask those people to get engaged and to get enrolled and to take a bigger responsibility for creating the future, all kinds of great things happen that you don't even know what they're going to be.
And I think the contrast to what Mark just described, which is often the mistake, in my opinion, that companies make in tough times, is they cut in the very two key areas that actually are critical for the brand. Their people, and therefore the culture, and their marketing.
Right.
And I'm not saying that I've never done layoffs. You can't have been in business over a long period of time. But even then, there is a way to do that that doesn't send the signal that you think that you don't value growth, you can't grow, you're changing the culture.
Right. I'm so glad to hear you say that, because that's actually something I feel passionate about personally, that in bad times, companies will reliably cut advertising, which you and I in the magazine business know is a terrible, terrible idea that no company should ever do. And
well, it's demonstrably true that if you don't cut advertising in a recession, you will come out of it with more market share.
That's
I mean,
exactly
that's been demonstrated over and over again.
And they will cut people costs. They will.
Well, those are the easiest ones to cut.
The easiest ones to cut. You get the immediate effect. But you're both in businesses that depend entirely on the human capital in the business.
Henry Luce used to say. Henry Luce, the founder of Time Inc., used to say, "My assets go home in the elevators at night."
That's exactly right.
So we found that the more transparency, and this is not just in tough times, but we did this in the last 18 months, the more transparency and the more we share with the common employee, all employees, and the more we get them to understand the challenges that we face, what we have to deliver from an income standpoint or a growth standpoint, and what the challenges are, the more people we engage in that process, the more solutions we come up with. And the tighter we keep that circle, the more problems that we face. And so now you not only are using collective intelligence from a lot of people, but the engagement level of the employees is a much higher, as opposed to a bunch of layoffs. People don't know when the next layoff's coming. And the same thing, Christie, we've had to lay some people off, but not as many as our competitors. And we just value that asset more than anything else, is the strength of those people.
And I think that point about transparency and communication is so important. When I first became president of Playboy, the company was in very bad financial shape. And sometimes that's the environment in which people sort of retreat, to Mark's point. You know, you kind of you have this small group that have these secret meetings. And instead, I started a series that I did all the years I ran the company of all employee meetings. And people could ask any question, and they could write it out ahead of time anonymously. And I treated those the same way I treated my public shareholder meetings, which is that it was my obligation to make everybody feel that they understood what we were trying to accomplish, what our challenges were, how whatever their job in the company was fit into that. And there's an extraordinary kind of resonance that comes from that in a culture.
It's what every CEO has said to me, that in tough times you've got to communicate more than in normal times, even though every force is pushing you to communicate less, right? Because you've got more on your plate, you've got more stuff to worry about and so forth.
You don't have good news.
Yeah, you don't have good news, that's exactly right. What else did you do? Look, I mean, as we were saying, we were in the same business. I mean, what else did you do to attract and keep the best people in your business? Because that's the whole game.
Right, and I actually think that's maybe job number one for CEOs, is to create a culture where good people want to come and do their best work, because that at the end of the day makes you or breaks you. I do think that, as you both were saying, it's easy to talk the talk, so the question is, do you walk the walk? And I think employees, especially as you look at each successive generation, have less inherent sense of loyalty and more of a sense of entitlement, and therefore they're kind of, right now we're in a terrible economy, so it's a little different, but in the main, they're interviewing you just as you're interviewing them, and therefore, if you do walk the walk, and I always had people interview with many people in the company for key jobs before I hired them, both so they could understand the culture and so that the people who were already in the organization could give me their feedback on whether this person would fit in. And I think that that's very important, so that people feel that they're not just taking a job, they're joining a culture.
Right. We were talking also about the importance of adapting to the times and even adapting business models, because nobody's business model lasts for a long time anymore. Everybody seems to have to do something new. You've been changing your business model at TaylorMade in a number of ways. Let me ask you a question. In the past 5 years, how many new drivers do you think you've introduced?
10.
This is in a business where, for many years, you never introduced a new club, and then
one every 3 years.
One every 3 years. What gave you confidence that that was the right way to go?
Well, we didn't really, again, and I hate to keep going back 10 years, but all of what we do today started 10 years ago, and I have a friend of mine that used to say, my bat, my ball, my rules. And we were so far behind our competitors in market share that they controlled the rules of the game. Right. So we said we have to change the rules, or we can be better, but we can't make a quantum leap in how we perform. So we looked at the marketplace, and what we found out is the 80-20 rule is really accurate in our industry. 20% of the people spend 80% of the dollars. What we really found out, though, when we looked into it, was the same 20% spent the 80 every year. So there aren't new people next year buying. Right. So those people that were buying drivers this year are the same ones buying drivers next year. So for us to get a growing market share, we needed to launch a driver every single year, which was a radical change to the industry. So in 2001, we started launching products every 12 months. We have 2 price point drivers. Now we launch a driver each year in each price point. 1 year later, we cascade those prices down. So we've eliminated all the middle tier brands, because you could now buy a product from us a year later at the same as you could a middle tier brand. So we've eliminated that level of competition. Our supply chain was constructed so it would be flexible and be able to cost engineer products down as the life cycles aged. So we make significant margins 2 and 3 years into that life cycle, and the model completely changed.
Right. Now, Christie, in a completely different business, you also had to change your model. There was an old model where you made all the profits on advertising in the magazine.
Right.
You had to change that. How is it changing in the future?
Well, I think that technology is